And the only ingredient, literally the only ingredient that matters in entrepreneurship is staying in the game, or entering the arena, I should say. Staying in the game. That's it. Because either you play long enough to see yourself win, or you die trying, in which case you won't be around to care.
The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vitruvian Podcast, a podcast about personal renaissance. I'm your host, Zach Shankin. Today, we can consider this part 2 of the Burn the Boats podcast I did, or a sequel to that podcast, which was immediately following or recently following when I decided to quit my full-time 9-to-5 job and chase the dream, go out on my own into this big wide world of entrepreneurship, the arena, as I often call it, and we'll probably reference in this podcast. I want to go over the biggest lessons I've learned and focus predominantly on the mindset shifts, the spiritual lessons, the perspectives that I think can help anyone either in preparation to making that decision or sustaining the decision to stay in the arena and continue to fight and continue to iterate and ultimately continue to give their gift to the world. I'll definitely get into some specifics in online business and the specificities of the different things that I've done in online business. But again, I want this to be mindset shifts because it's not necessarily about going into online business or creating content or creating a podcast or any of the different things that I've tried and continuing to do. It's much more about the principles that I think and know have completely changed my journey, and I often impart to whether they're clients or friends on these calls because everybody goes through the same stuff. And as I will definitely get into, entrepreneurship, much like life at large, is at least 90%, if not 95, 99%, a spiritual and mental battlefield as opposed to a technical one. The skills that you need to start and run a business, the knowledge you need to get, barring very niche, high skill things like maybe coding or developing a medical device or something like that. If you're entering anything somewhat broad, like you just want to sell products online, you want to run an in-person business, you want to coach people, anything in that strata is technically very easy. But what's really, really difficult across that journey is simply staying in the game, like weathering the storm of quote unquote failure, missteps, mistakes, setbacks, and the dialogue that goes on in your head telling you you're crazy, you should quit, it hasn't worked this long, will it ever, all that kind of dialogue, which I'll definitely get into. But I want to also start out with saying, like, why does this matter? Why does this podcast matter? And why am I so passionate about connecting people to their gift, and why I believe if you're any amount of a free thinker, which I think everyone who listens to this podcast is, you should be pursuing your own thing, because the world doesn't need more pale copies of the same person doing the same thing with a job title that any other human could get plugged into. If you were to either quit that job or, God forbid, something happens to you, if your position can get put in on LinkedIn and people can apply to it, then it's not uniquely yours. And I'm speaking to the people that I think are on that edge. They know they're meant for more. They're curious about taking those steps, but fear is currently gripping them and holding them back, or you back, whoever's listening, from taking that initial leap of faith. And it is a leap of faith, and I'll get into all that. I am also not disillusioned to think that everyone in the world needs to be, or even can be, an entrepreneur and work for themselves. Obviously, every entrepreneur eventually will need to hire people. So this can be extended beyond the fact of like building your own thing for business. It can just be living an intentionally designed life, connecting with what you believe your gifts are to give the world, even if they don't bring you money. And arguably, it's even more pure if it doesn't bring you money, but you're simply just giving your gift to the world because it's the right thing to do, because it sets your heart on fire, and because it helps raise the collective consciousness and helps other people in their life. Like that's what it's all about. It is not a zero-sum game. And all of what I try to do in whatever the external looks like, whether it is business or content or coaching or sending an encouraging text or complimenting somebody on the street, is to simply just raise the collective vibration and fight back against, in my opinion, the evil forces that are a lot more organized than the good guys, I'll say. I'll also say that if you're in the boat, which you likely are, of being a younger person where you might be childless and single, you legitimately have no mechanical reason not to at least try. You're only financially dependent on yourself. There are an infinite amount of ways to financially provide for yourself. If you were born in the West or the US, you owe it to yourself and, in my opinion, the world to give it a swing. I think as men, we are supposed to protect and provide materially for our family, but I think preceding that is spiritual protection, provision, and leadership. And you can only lead from the front and be an aspirational and inspirational figure if you are aspirational and inspirational yourself, connected to a mission that calls you forth every single day. And speaking directly from experience, if you, the father or the leader of a home, relegate yourself to simply just being materially the provider, and that's your whole focus, and you go to a job before your family sees you, you come back and you barely see them, and you essentially like sacrifice your soul on the altar of providing for others, I think it's noble to provide, but I think that self-sacrifice is not. And if you relegate yourself to simply materially provided, your family, your wife, your kids, your grandchildren will treat you like that. They'll take your word for it, and they will treat you like the wallet that you have behaved like. And that sounds harsh to say, but it's true. And a quote that I'll also lead off with as well is that the second that your material needs are provided for, rent, insurance, utilities, whatever, like once your head is above water, how you make money will always be more important than how much you make. Because that number is ever escalating, right? Like people who think they're really crushing it just need to meet the person who is making their yearly salary in a month. And then you realize there's levels to the game. And then there's always one bigger beast, right? Because we can even point to billionaires like Musk and Bezos and say, well, they don't really have anything larger. Well, Putin and the institution that controls Russia exists. There's oil money in the Middle East. There's all kinds of shadowy establishments and bloodlines that have more wealth than you can imagine. And in fact, they're the ones printing the money. So the point is, the amount of money you make is the temptation to be the focus. I think that is the evil deception. But the thing that matters on a soul level and on a level for everybody else is how. Because that's actually how you spend your time and attention during the week. You only get the paycheck once a month or twice a month. So the number only hits you for like 15 seconds a month, and then you see the number on the screen slightly change. But again, once you're not living paycheck to paycheck, that number is just a number. But how you spent the 40, 50, 60 hours of that week, the time in between, and how excited you were in the mornings and nights and weekends for that stuff, that's the texture of your life. So in my opinion, while you have the opportunity and the freedom, swing over and over and over, trying to find and trying to experiment and trying to massage your way into a vehicle that does feel really good and you could see yourself doing for the rest of your life. Because if you don't, somebody else will fill that Google Calendar for you, and you'll wake up at 35, 45, 55, 65, and you'll have missed it. Life will have passed you by. So with enough caveats and introduction, I want to get into my journey. And I think I mentioned it on the Burning the Boats podcast, but I don't think I actually read it to you guys. But if you're watching the video, you'll see this pendant in my hand, and you'll probably have recognized it from a bunch of content that I made, and it's no longer around my neck. But I put this pendant on when I started my entrepreneurial journey. You can't really see it on the video, but it is a tiny little tarot card, the Fool. It was inspired after seeing a YouTube video from Nathaniel Drew, and the long and the short of tarot, and I'm not placing some sort of mystical or demonic energy on it. I simply just like the symbolism, but the story of the deck is the story of the Fool. It's kind of this lighthearted, character who is going through the story of his life narrated by the deck of tarot cards. And all of this, of course, is allegorical and metaphorical for our lives. And the card itself, the Fool, you can kind of see, and I'll put it in an image on screen, or you can just look it up yourself. He's kind of standing at the precipice of a cliff, and he's laughing and kind of dancing and looking up wistfully at the stars, and he has no idea the danger in front of him. So when I put this pendant on, when I quit my job and started my journey, I kind of set the intention, and I'll read the prayer in a moment that I set with it between myself and God to maintain the fool's optimism and ignorance, because I think that is the secret sauce of staying in the game. And I'll get into details, but it has definitely been the secret sauce of keeping me in the game. And the reason I've taken it off is because I feel like I'm turning a leaf in my entrepreneurial journey. I'm ready to mature and level up in a lot of areas, especially coming into the 2025 year. But having this set, I feel like it really is now like a integral part of the fabric of myself now. And it's probably the consummate skill, especially at the beginning of starting any entrepreneurial journey, because you have to be so delusional that you're just going to be okay. It's just going to figure itself out, that you kind of ignore quote unquote obvious red flags over and over and over and over again, because they are going to come up. Because at the beginning, you have none of the know-how. You have no idea how you fit into this grand puzzle. You don't know product market fit. You don't know product development. You don't know marketing. You don't know ads. You don't know sales. Like, you don't know anything about anything. And that's awesome. The important part is you just believe in yourself, and you believe in God or the universe figuring itself out. So you just have to take that to heart. And this was the prayer that I kind of wrote out and set with this pendant when I put it on. I said, God, I say this prayer to set my intention moving forward and to ask your blessings and protection along my journey. Allow me to be wise in my actions, but always maintain the fool's optimism. To go forward with a smile on my face, eyes towards heaven, and enjoy the road ahead. Allow me to make mistakes with grace and be quick and agile in my adjustments. Thank you for calling me to this path, and thank you for preparing me for what is ahead. I ask that you protect me as I pursue my purpose, your calling for me, and that you continue to show me the way along every step of my journey. With love, the Fool. Not too shabby on the writing side, I have to say, but a really cool prayer and intention. And I'll keep this pendant as long as is feasible. I'll kind of have it in my little trinkets and special totems area back home. I think it's just like a really cool note to start off this podcast about not only the perspective that it can have or effect it can have on your journey, but a callback, a harken back to a younger, more ignorant, but equally optimistic version of myself. So the first of the major lessons I've already touched on is that entrepreneurship, business, chasing your dream, whatever you want to call it, stepping into the arena, we should say maybe as a blanket term, is easily 90+% mental. Obviously, we know from Hermeticism and some of these other wisdom schools that all is mind, right? Like reality is a projection of our consciousness. But where does that meet the road for entrepreneurship? Well, you're spending a lot of time in your head. You're problem solving. You're thinking about what you're going to give the world. You're thinking about how it's going to work. But the shadow of that is you're constantly asking questions. How is this going to work out? When is this going to work out? Is it going to work out? And the worst part is for an undetermined amount of time, you don't know the answer to any of them. And if you're in an environment where you're around other people, especially if they're stuck in what I'll call the old paradigm or like the Matrix or whatever, but I like the old paradigm, they have an answer when somebody asks them that thing because they have a job title, they have a company that they assume is going to be around, they have a hierarchical structure that they can eventually evolve into. They, on paper, have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, etc. So they have nice, comfortable answers for those questions. And they will ask you the same, but you don't have those answers. It's okay, but it doesn't feel okay. And that dialogue in your head is absolutely brutal, and it's what kills so many entrepreneurs' dreams, because eventually you just fold. You lean back into certainty, and you're like, you know what, I gave it a try. It was just too complicated, or it's about time for me to start getting serious, or whatever fucking language you use. But people fold. And the only ingredient, literally the only ingredient that matters in entrepreneurship is staying in the game, or entering the arena, I should say. staying in the game. That's it. Because either you play long enough to see yourself win, or you die trying, in which case you won't be around to care. That sounds dramatic, but it's absolutely true. And there's countless stories. The number one I can recommend for any aspiring or current entrepreneur or dream chaser is the autobiography of James Dyson. Dyson, the vacuum company, the multi-billion-dollar mega corporation. He went through something like 5,000 or 7,000 iterations of the first Dyson vacuum. Like a freaking madman over like a decade or 12 years or something crazy, 15 years in his garage. Absolute madman. He nearly lost all his money with these prototypes. He had a family and kids. And it was like late in life, like 30s or 40s when he finally cracked it. And then boom, one of the biggest brands to ever exist. Actual technical innovation as well. And this is constant in every great story over and over and over. You just have to stay in the game. You just have to iterate and keep going and redefine quote unquote failure as quitting. The only way you fail is opting out of the game. So I like to think of, and I certainly believe this for myself, like entering the arena is a one-way door. There's no going back in. And I honestly think, now that I'm thinking about it, entering the arena is the perfect analogy because the gladiators who stepped in, they sealed the gates behind you. You literally either win and get to go back to your bed and riches and fame and whatever, or you die in the arena. That's what it's fucking about. Like, that is the perfect analogy. And the unserious benefit, I suppose, or to kind of bring back the drama a little bit, is that it can be fun the entire way there. It doesn't have to be this like life or death seriousness. And I actually think the seriousness is a bit of a mind virus as well. Like people telling you that you need to be serious or this paradigm that you need to eventually grow up. That is all a scam, and it's also all entirely unproductive on your journey. The next thing I can say, and this is experientially, I'm confident in this, is that you absolutely will not regret entering the arena and starting your thing. I have zero regrets about starting, and I was even reflecting about this, like where I am financially in my life, whatever, 2 years in or whatever. Very different than potentially I expected at the beginning. But nonetheless, I'm unbelievably grateful for all of the crazy journey, like especially even when I look back on the library of podcasts, the body of work, even since starting vlogging, the amount of adventures I've had across the entire world. I mean, I'm still recording this in Bali, Indonesia. I'm about to go to Lombok before the end of the year. I've lived like this insane dream. And while I have definitely taken voluntarily a knock in earning potential, like had I stayed in a stable career and gotten 1 year promotion, 2 year promotion, you can always out earn in the future periods of low earning. And I'll land that in a concrete example in a second. But there is actually no way to buy back your time. Again, this is a trope, like your time is your most valuable resource. I say it at the end of every podcast, but it's unbelievably true. I'll land this really quickly for you. And I was telling this to a friend on a phone call the other day, kind of consulting him on, he's about to launch a coaching offer. And we were kind of talking through business. And I was trying to describe the mindset of us in the arena versus the old paradigm. And what I described to him is like, let's say, what's the most successful you could get in a traditional career path? Like an ultra high earner, maybe like a doctor with their own practice or a really high paying lawyer or engineer kind of person. Let's say they take home, just for the sake of easy numbers, $1 million a year. Like that would be easily 1% in the world, probably still 1% in the US. And your life is set. Like you're not 0.01%, but like your life is amazing, right? I know adjusted for inflation, but $1 million a year is an incredible amount of money. And most people will never earn $1 million across their entire career, just statistically speaking. So let's say you make $1 million a year. That is where you've reached your glass ceiling. It's really hard in any of those structures to then multiply without stepping aside. And then you're a doctor who also makes some sort of product or a drug or a skincare product or whatever. Like you have to build a brand and a business outside of it to multiply. So you're capped at that earning. But I have met people in entrepreneurship who are making $1 million a month, which means that if you try and fail for 10 years, missing and barely making enough money to pay rent for 10 years, a whole decade. But at the end of that decade, at 30, say, from 20 to 30 you try, and you finally figure it out at 30, or 30 to 40 you try, and you finally figure it out at 40. Well, that next year, you make in 1 year what that person made in a decade. Think about that. You literally snap your fingers and you close the financial gap, but neither of you can adjust for the time lost. There's nothing you can do to go back and get that decade. And it's up to that person whether they lived a good life, but you know at the end of that cycle, you honored the call, you tried, and you were rewarded for your persistence and faith. So it's just to say that you're operating on a completely different playing field, and the upside is unbelievably uncapped financially in the entrepreneurial world. Like, there is actually no ceiling. You could be the next Bezos or Jobs or whatever. So theoretically it's infinite, but there is a ceiling for earning in the regular paradigm, the old paradigm. Just something to consider when finances, which tends to, again, be like the main deception or the drag away from chasing your dreams at the beginning. Because at the beginning, you're giving everything up. Not only the security, not only the easy answers, but even the financial stability. There may be months where you're worried about how you're going to pay rent, or you've got credit cards hanging over your head, or whatever your story is. But the amazing thing is that, like, that's everybody's story, all these great characters. So you can always close the financial gap, which gives you permission to know that you won't regret trying. Additionally, there is the disparity of the time value of money, meaning less money when you're young is worth more to you because of what you can do than more money when you're older. You've probably also heard this before, like the 40-year-old would give up all their money to be your age in your young body again. Well, if that's true, and I believe it is true, you can just ask any adult, would they trade it all to be able to go back and live it again? Then you know that it doesn't matter what they earned, whether they were a normal old paradigm thinker or they were a massively successful entrepreneur. Like, you think Bill Gates in his decaying soy bug-fueled body is not craving youthful energy? I mean, they're probably fucking eating adrenochrome blood to try to feel alive again like a child, but you have that innocence. So if you have $1,000, $10,000, $20,000 in your bank account, you are the equivalent of 100 millionaire or whatever it is down the road, because you have that capital now and the ability to express it through your youthful body and your vitality. This is, again, like a mental paradigm shift or a reframe to encourage you to stay in the game, because a lot of the doubt, again, it creeps in through these windows of the financial thing, like, oh, I'm not building my savings, or I don't have as much as so-and-so, or, you know, this person was already saving for a house, or blah, blah, blah. Like, all this like comparison nonsense that runs circles in your head. It doesn't matter, because you're rich beyond measure and the money is on its way and you're living according to your calling, which is all you're obligated to do in the eyes of yourself and God. Next is, paired with this, you can start to think, say you're a few years in on a long journey, you're building a big brand, or like myself, you know, the time curve for this thing really taking off, who knows what it is, right? It could be this year, but maybe it's not after 3 years. Maybe it's after 5. Maybe it's after 10. Maybe it's after 15. It's not totally in my hands other than the inputs I can put in today. So you can also start to think like, oh, am I wasting time? Okay, cool. Like, I'm comfortable maybe making less money, but like, am I actually wasting my time? Like, is this a poor way to spend my 20s? Am I throwing away my ability, or this window of time I could be somehow more productive or building more of an asset, maybe financially or otherwise? But if you reframe to the fact that you are the asset that you're building equity in, you're the thing that's accumulating, then all of that falls away, because you literally can't waste time, because everything is accumulating in you, the asset. That includes like fun trips and experiences and talking to beautiful girls on the beach and taking care of your body and reading amazing books. Like, you actually cannot waste time, because it's all going into you. It's accumulating into the equity of the you asset. This is completely anti-old paradigm thinking. It's something you have to adopt in the arena, and recognize that You're the asset. So even if you haven't gotten the external reflection yet in the amount of money you want to make a month or the amount of followers you're trying to get to or whatever your metrics are, doesn't matter. You, the person, the actual individuated human being, is improving and accumulating as time goes on. Every book, every tweet you read, every tweet you write, every cold DM you send, every good sales call, every bad sales call, every launched experiment, every failed experiment, you're getting better. You're learning skills. You're improving. So nothing is wasted. Your time is not wasted because you've spent it improving yourself, the asset. And paired with this, I've already kind of gone over it, like the whole decade earning paradigm. You should just take as many shots as it takes to get to that end point. Not only to the end point of making a bunch of money, because that's like just a cool cherry on top, but the end point, as I said at the beginning, of getting to a life that you love. Getting to a life that is yours and entirely your own. Getting to a life that is aligned with why the hell you were actually put here. Take as many shots as possible to become that version of yourself. That will then make you the best father you could ever imagine, partner you could ever imagine, friend you could ever imagine, a person you can look in the mirror every single day and be proud of who they are and what they get to do every single day. Literally swing as many times as possible. And with all the reframes I've already mentioned and will go into, nothing is ever wasted along that journey. You're not making a mistake. You did exactly what was necessary to get to that place. And on the topic of regret, the only thing I regret across these past 2 years when I was reflecting and writing out notes for this episode is periods of inaction or inactivity. I've alluded to it, especially if you go back and listen to the Mushroom Trip podcast, but preceding that period of my life, there was probably like 6 or 8 months that I was just in a very low vibrational state. And upon honest reflection, a huge percentage of it was initial bad thought entered my mind or doubt or whatever. You know, you have a low day or a couple low days or a low week. And then I entertained those thoughts and poured fuel onto it. And I chose with all that uncertainty to stop. And I was like, oh, I need to think about what the right thing to do is. I'll sit here and ideate on the right kind of content to make or the right offer to put out there or the right business to pivot into. But you get no data in ideation, thinking in your head. You need to take action to iterate and get data. Try, fail, like be an experimenter. So that is to say, like, the only thing I regret is the periods of inaction. And this is the perfect recipe to either get or stay, in my case, stuck. In life in general, momentum in a singular direction is one of the most powerful, magical forces in the universe. And it's for the simple reason that it is defying the universal law, quote unquote, of entropy. Everything else in the world, theoretically, according to science, is heading towards entropy. It's dissolving into chaos. The only thing that opposes this force are human beings. We create order, we build buildings, we take all these different elements and we erect structures, we launch businesses, we take all the ideas floating in our head and then we write about them, we make movies, we make art, we talk to each other, we organize, we are anti-entropic. And momentum is doing the same type of action or a series of actions in one direction, building towards something. So it is literally like this anti-matter magic that you have within yourself. So once you've started making momentum, you know, you're posting once a week or you're doing 100 cold DMs every day for your business or whatever the daily thing is, maybe you're just starting to go to the gym. The worst thing you can do is interrupting the compounding, losing that magical momentum. It's unbelievably hard to start. And you know, whatever thing you've started, like the hardest part is always starting. So once you get that flywheel going, it doesn't even matter if it's crawling slowly. You just can't interrupt the compounding. I've made this mistake, which is why I'm harping on it. You won't get what you think out of taking a break. And this is different than periods of burnout and taking a breather. Because again, you extend your timeline, like you miss one day or you miss a week. For instance, I took a few months off the podcast, but I knew I was never going to stop on a 5-year timeline or a 10-year timeline. So I wasn't worried about that interruption. But even that interruption, there was realistically no reason I should have stopped. Luckily, in that window, I was also making the daily YouTube videos. But once you curate a little bit of momentum, don't stop. And then if you do make the mistake of taking a breather or stopping, don't convince yourself that you can't start immediately again and keep that momentum going. Like a thought that definitely will creep in your head, especially if you're doing anything public facing like content or whatever, is, oh, well, I haven't been posting for it's already been a week, or it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks. What are they going to think if I come back? Or it's already been this long. Like, how do I even make the first post back? Literally no one is thinking about it at all. Like, what were the last 3 Instagram reels you just scrolled through, pieces of content, YouTube video? You have no idea. It's in one ear, out the next. You are myopically focused on your life because it's yours. So you're thinking about this whole thing. You're the one sitting in your room ruminating on, what content direction do I go to? Or how do I adjust my offer? Or can I even take my website down or change my bio? Or God knows what else you're thinking about. Obviously, I'm just listing off stuff that has gone through my head over the year or the 2 years. But just get right back on the saddle as if nothing ever happened. And you'll find that the momentum was still kind of quietly doing its thing. Just keep chipping away. Similarly, don't be afraid to experiment and iterate along the way, whether it is with content or like a business model. Treat business and entrepreneurship like a puzzle to be solved, a puzzle or a game to be played rather than a problem to be solved. Because the problem means like there's a sense of urgency, there's a sense of seriousness, there's a sense of right or wrong answer. But a puzzle or like a fun game is like you're in it for the game of it. You're in it to play. You're running different experiments because you don't actually know at the outset the result you're going to get. And we have this temptation to want to find our thing really quickly because we need to satisfy those people we talked about at the beginning that want to know the how, the what, the when, the where, the why. So we want to race to those answers. So it creates this like false sense of urgency and doubt and fear in our heads when we don't know those. And we're just trying to race to that answer. Like, oh, I need to build my social media marketing agency with this offer in this specific niche or what have you. But if you were treating it more like an experiment and you just looked at the data like, okay, clearly this market doesn't need to be served right now, or what I thought would help this group of people isn't actually helping them. So maybe I need to step back and think, what does my audience actually want to get sold to? How can I actually help people with coaching or a course or whatever? Asking those questions is a better way to phrase it. And I may have mentioned it on this podcast, but definitely in my newsletter. A good friend of mine, Dylan, he's an online consultant. He's been in the online business space for a long time. And I was asking some of his advice, and he said he got this amazing kind of paradigm shift from a mentor, which is that you should be in a season of dating before you look to marry. And the same is true for your offer or your business. Like, date around, be confident in launching your offer, product, or service, seeing if it sticks, go on the first date, second date, and if you don't like them, you just date somebody else. It's crazy if you were to say, hey, you need to go on a date with a person you never met, and by the way, you're getting married. That would be insane, right? Like, we all need to at least meet the person, see what they're about, see if there's chemistry. Same thing is true in business. Do you like fulfilling the product? Do you like the actual product that you are selling? Does this product or service help the person you're intending to help in the way that you thought it would? Do you like the lifestyle that this business gets you? Do you like the amount of money you're making? All these different variables you can only know through experimenting. So treat it with like less of a seriousness and more of a curiosity. And the insight from my friend Dylan and his mentor as well, these guys have worked with or are on offers or businesses that are making 6, 7, 8 figures. So like very successful businesses, and the window behind the curtain is that those people are just as experimental as the next guy. Like, people are taking down offers, launching new offers overnight. They're completely scrapping websites, starting over. And I think for the novice entering the arena, first of all, you don't know that. You don't know that the big guys are just as uncertain as you are. But second of all, you think that you have to have a hard answer or have it figured out, as if that's how it's being played at the highest levels. It's way more experimental. I would even conjecture, I haven't met anyone with a window into this, but like people who work at huge companies, like the lever movers, the strategists at massive companies that are in the creative space, like Amazon, Apple, any of the technology suite companies. I bet at the highest level, there's like whiteboard sessions where people are absolutely scratching their head, tearing down entire projects because it just doesn't make sense. And like, that's literally just the game. So again, treat it with a lot more curiosity and a lot less seriousness, and you'll be more comfortable launching experiments and you won't beat yourself up along the way. And now to a little bit more specifics on where I'm at. I know I've alluded on the vlogs, and I'm starting to show behind the scenes a little bit about this brand that I'm launching this 2025 year of physical products. I'm going to be building like a natural wellness house with consumable products, garments, and some other things. And that's kind of like a big pivot, at least from the information world that I've come from. And for those that don't know, selling information is like courses, coaching, PDFs, videos, whatever. Like you're putting information, you're organizing it, and then you're selling it to people. Now, I still think that that's the most efficient way to make a tremendous amount of money for your time. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for coaching, specifically like high ticket coaching, because I've bought into that and I believe in that. And that's the lesson that I'm extrapolating from this pivot or evolution in my journey is I finally realized that you should never sell anything that you wouldn't buy yourself, you haven't bought yourself, or doesn't allow you to tell your whole truth. I've just grown so disillusioned in the coaching guru space, this bubble that's existed for the last 2 or 3 years, because I've met so many of these grifters who are literally like overweight fitness coaches or business coaches who don't have the results in their own business or are faking Stripe receipts and the amount of money they make, like literal liars, thieves, and deceivers. And that ruins for the rest of us who want to help people the reputation, because somebody like yourself listening buys into the wrong coaching program or buys a course that they think will change their life and then it doesn't. So I'm just been increasingly disillusioned in that world. I also think part of this is how myopic the area of Bali is. Like a lot of people here are different coaches and consultants and whatever. And the trajectory is always to coach people on the thing that you actually want to help the world with. Say you want to help people lose weight. And then you scale that business to the point where you now go to sell to other coaches how to coach their clients. So you're selling coaching to coaches on how to coach the coaching offer. And it's just like everybody's selling expensive air to each other. It's not real. It's not actually helping the forward march of humanity, and it's creating more noise and less signal. And so I'm stepping away from that, or at least partially taking myself away from that, because I just don't feel congruent in my soul that like selling a PDF, like it's why I put the Da Vinci Blueprint out for free in a podcast. And if you sign up for the newsletter or the Substack or whatever, it's in the first email, you get the PDF itself. It's just free game because I want the tools to be out there for free for the high agency people. And then the really high agency people that want to make an investment in themselves, I'm happy to coach you. Like DM me if you're trying to actually get after your dream, build an online business, whatever. Like I still want to tap into those people, but I don't want to take money from the mental masturbators, the people who buy the $150 video course thing that my friends have told me to put out a million times. I could easily make a video course and sell it for a couple $100s, but I know that that doesn't actually help people because I've never bought one, and everybody I know that buys shit like that doesn't actually take the action, because the information isn't what changes your life, it's the action, which is why coaching matters. And I think information is kind of like this bubble. A lot of it's a scam. I'm very disillusioned. So that's a big thing. And then additionally, I've just always been a very tactile person. I mean, even with this like pendant that I got for myself and everything in my life, right? I've mentioned to you guys and shown you on the vlog, like all the different stuff that I've made already. Like I built my bed back home, side table, desk, the wallet that I made. Like I can't help but be a designer and a customizer of my whole life. I've said before, like, I don't want to get rich to wear designer. I want to get rich to be designer. But there's like this third paradigm that is like, for some reason, eluded me until now, which is like, you can get rich being the designer, building a brand where you get to pour your art and creativity into and help people with products that are genuinely quality, solve a need that you see, would buy yourself, all of these things. So that's the brand project with Virtus Athletica. You guys will see more updates. Instagram's the only place I've put anything out. The website will be under development, but just sign up to the newsletter. You'll see all the behind the scenes updates. Subscribe to the YouTube channel for the vlog where I'll be actually showing the process and building in public. But that's my story. That's like a lot of specificity. But the takeaway for you is, if at any point you feel like you're selling something or trying to build a business around a service that you wouldn't pay for yourself, or you can't tell your whole truth to sell, then you shouldn't be selling it, Maybe that works for somebody else. Maybe that's congruent with their story. But if you can't tell somebody about your financial situation, or you can't post pictures of your body because you're out of shape, but you're still trying to sell fitness, like that's not the right thing for you to be selling at that time. It doesn't mean fitness coaching is not supposed to be sold. Like there are healthy coaches that should be doing God's work, but it ain't for you, bud. If you're 35% body fat and you have no idea about nutrition or sunlight or anything, like you are ruining it for the rest of them. And it's probably eating your soul alive because you know deep down that you're living a lie. So that's the encouragement, is don't sell anything that you can't tell your truth in, and you wouldn't buy yourself that you don't feel is entirely congruent. Because as I've alluded to this entire time, staying in the arena is a mental game. And if you're not 100% bought in, you're going to get smoked and you're going to quit. And being bought in means believing in what you're building and selling, like as much as you believe in yourself and in God. Like it has to be that real. It has to be essentially given to you from the universe that you're put here to spread that thing or build that thing. That's how confident you have to feel. And it's not going to happen if you're telling or living a lie. Now, the last bucket of lessons before I close out with some really cool quotes is the realization that as a creative of any kind, and I would say that most entrepreneurs are creatives. I'm a lot more on the artist creative side of the spectrum than truly like an operator, but either way, you're a problem solver if you're entering the arena or trying to. So as a creative, someone who's generating things that are new, your number one priority for yourself is state management. And what I mean by that is like your vibrational level and managing that and keeping that high at all costs. Because if you're a solopreneur, it means that everything in the business comes from you, i.e. you are the business, which means if you want the business to be successful, you have to vibrate at a frequency that lets you excitedly, confidently, and continuously do the things that you need to without quitting, without disillusioning yourself, without burnout. You have to just be vibrating really high. And there are a few key things that go into this, but I'd say there's probably nothing higher on the list than environment. I've split tested both options twice, so I will speak from experience here, but when you're setting out, you probably have two options. One is going to be like worse environment energetically, but cheaper. Like for many people, it would be, I'm going to stay home and live with my parents while I build this thing up, right? Well, lower the burn rate and build. Or I'm going to go buy or rent an apartment or live in a founder house or move to a new city with a bunch of creatives and just figure it out. I've split tested both. I lived at home for a while, went to Bali, came back, went back out into the world, and now I'm here in Bali. And between those periods of time, universally the most constricted energetically I felt was back at home. Now, I have my own family environment and yours might be better. You might have a better relationship with your parents. It might be less anxiety inducing or constricting, but I do know for a fact, even if it's like all love and good vibes at home, it's still not an expansive environment. And what I mean by that is that new data isn't entering the system and creating new connections. That house has existed in its current state for a while. Your parents know what they like. They live in routine. And this is not a knock to them. It's just like the nature of life. You are growing less when you're old because you're not growing. You're beginning and preparing for death. Like there are just seasons of life. But you, the 20-something, 30-something dreamer, you're in an abundant entropic growth stage. You want to expose yourself to a bunch of data and leave room for magic. And that magic happens at the random encounters at your local gym or co-working space or networking dinner. And those are a lot harder to facilitate when you're living at home just trying to save money. I promise you the benefit you'll get from paying a little bit more in rent to like go out there will drastically outweigh the extra time you think you'll get from just saving a little bit more at home. I'm not telling you how to live life. I'm just saying I've run the experiment twice and I see it over and over and over again. And then a final thing I'll also add on, I don't think we rise to our aspirations. I think we rise to the level of responsibility we assume. Like if you're a guy listening to this and say you're dating a girl and you guys get pregnant and you have a kid, you're going to fucking figure it out. It's just a fact. you now know that the weight of their lives are on your shoulders, you'll figure it out. You'll figure out how to make money. You'll figure out how to pay rent. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. But if you're an entrepreneur and you continue to play the game of like lowering how much you're spending, not taking things too serious, always having a back pocket option to go home, that's not assuming more responsibility. And you're always going to default to less action, less drastic action, less massive action, because somewhere in your subconscious, you know that there's that safety blanket. So simulate a little bit of responsibility. It doesn't mean go get a girl pregnant, but it means pay for rent in a city that you have no business paying rent for. Take a trip that almost drains your bank account except for the return ticket. These types of things will facilitate magic around you and within you that you can't possibly imagine. And the amazing thing is that once you've built the environment or curated the environment in the way that facilitates your growth, it becomes passive. The environment is doing the growing for you. Now all you have to do is compound. You're in an amazing place. Pick your lever tasks each day, which I outline in the Da Vinci Blueprint, like 3 movers that are moving the ball forward towards your dream, and then just live that dream day on repeat over and over. You actually enjoy the process and you get the goal. Novel concept in the grind culture world, but you can do both because I'm doing it right now. I have friends all around me that are doing it. It's real, and everything else is a scam. It's trying to scare you. And as you've detected, fear is the mind virus. It must be avoided at all costs. There is no room for fear inside of the arena. And along with environment is finding your tribe of people. I've gone over this. I think one of the earliest podcasts I did, like single digits, I did like a Find Your Wolf Pack podcast, like putting people around you that are more aligned. And I've kind of alluded to this trajectory where at the beginning, it's isolation. You're stepping away from the old self and the old group, and then you're alone. So initially you start finding those people online, but putting them in your physical environment is magic. It's what I'm most looking forward to in the 2025 year. I'm putting together like a creatives founder house. It's looking like in the United States. I'm not going to dox myself, but you guys will see more of that on the vlogs. Either way, I'm going to put creative minds under one roof finally and just build, because the magic of the small dinner table conversations, the little motivating factor of having other people around you, like it's literally magic. And I want to give you guys this amazing quote that I recently found from Timothy Leary on finding the others that are like you. Admit it, you aren't like them. You're not even close. You may occasionally dress yourself up as one of them, watch the same mindless television shows as they do, maybe even eat the same fast food sometimes. But it seems that the more you try to fit in, the more you feel like an outsider, watching the normal people as they go about their automatic existences. For every time you say club passwords like, have a nice day and weather's awful today, eh? You yearn inside to say forbidden things like, tell me something that makes you cry. Or what do you think deja vu is for? Face it. You even want to talk to that girl in the elevator. But what if that girl in the elevator and the balding man who walks past your cubicle at work are thinking the same thing? Who knows what you might learn from taking a chance on a conversation with a stranger? Everyone carries a piece of the puzzle. Nobody comes into your life by mere coincidence. Trust your instincts, do the unexpected, find the others. I couldn't resonate more. I imagine you feel exactly the same. And as the awake and confident few, it kind of falls on you and I to go spark those conversations. I think it's why it's important to step into the arena publicly if you have been given a big dream or mission, because you get to light or pour lighter fluid on the ember of other people's spirit. I don't think that the human spirit in anyone is actually mundane or normie or NPCs. I don't believe in any of that. I actually think that we were born for a reason. Whether you want to call that a soul contract where you agreed to come back into this life, or your God wanting to experience itself, like conversation for a different podcast, but you're here for a reason. I don't think anyone was born for an accident. There's just a lot of people that are walking around sleepwalking and sedated by the way the modern world works. So if you're awake, if you're listening to this podcast, if you made it to this point, like you got to go find the others. You got to wake up the sleeping lions with your passion and your courage. Light as many fires as possible, because then we'll actually have a world surrounded by amazing people. It's why, like the beginning, I think it's important. We can't have these pale copies of everybody else. Everybody should enter the arena, because this is where it's fucking happening. Like, we're all living on sandbox mode, and the rest of the world is convinced that they can't, but it doesn't mean that they don't want to. So as I did in the first Burn the Boats podcast, I think, and certainly as the intro and outro of this podcast being snippets of this larger quote, I want to leave you guys again with the famous man in the arena quote from Theodore Roosevelt. It's like gospel to my ears, and I think it's like the anthem of all entrepreneurs or people chasing their dreams. So this is for you guys. Here it is once again. It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Cheers to those in the arena and those aspiring to enter it. Thank you for spending your time and attention with myself today. I'll talk to you all soon. Be the Renaissance.
And if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat.